I think everyone knows the most important part of Apex is your settings. If you missed shots and couldn't seem to hit water if you fell out of a boat, it's probably because your settings and nothing else. Sarcasm aside, though, settings are a huge factor in Apex. Having proper button layout and sensitivity is a big part of the game in terms of playing to your full potential. And while I do believe in having personal keybinds that suit you best, there is a lot of research done by pro controller players that can't be ignored. So hello everyone, I'm your hostess with the mostest 8-second gaming, and today I'm going to be breaking down all of the best controller settings for Apex Legends. This video took a lot of time and effort because I personally play mouse and keyboard, so I had to reach out to some other high-level players that do play controller in order to get some collective data and bring you the best settings that I can. So do me a huge favor and hit that like button. It only takes a second and really helps out the channel. Also, if you want to stay up to date with the latest Apex Legends tips, tricks, and news, don't forget to smash that sub button and ring the bell to be notified when we post a new video. But now with that out of the way, let's talk controller settings. And the first thing I want to point out and talk about is what controller you use. This may seem a bit weird to some people, but the type of controller you use has a huge impact on how you play the game and what kind of stuff will be available to you. And I'm not talking about Xbox versus PlayStation, I mean the modded controllers that have paddles or extra buttons that you can map keybinds to. Now, some players that play on base controllers may be a little worried about switching over to paddles because it's a learning curve that may take a while to get used to. But just like learning new keybinds on mouse and keyboard, it is very worth it, and eventually you will unlock a higher tier of playing. You will be able to map new keybinds in order to help you out in fights, which we will get to later on. But on top of that, it's just a big quality of life boost. I'm not sponsored by any one brand, so if you're interested in picking up a controller with paddles, you can look into Scuff, Battle Beaver, Xbox Elite, or Razer. They all have solid options to pick from. Alternatively, you can pick up what's called a strike pack. They are cheap options that fit onto regular controllers, and these do have paddles that you can rebind and play like a modded controller. But do be careful, as these have programs on them that can get you banned, so I don't recommend strike packs. If you have the available funds, definitely look into one of the other options. Now that you have a good understanding of the controllers, we can move into actual settings that affect you in game, and obviously we're going to be talking about sensitivity. This is going to be the biggest factor when looking into settings for a controller because they control how you are able to look around. Having dialed in sends helps you massively when aiming and tracking players. Too high of a sends and you may have issues tracking. Too low of a sends and you might have issues flicking onto new targets. Or if a player has good movement, you won't be able to keep up with them. All of them have their ups and downs, or pros and cons if you will. So play around with some and see what you like. For reference, 1 to 3 is low, 4 to 6 is medium, and 7 and 8 are high. My teammate for ranked in tournaments runs 7-6 and really likes it. But Rambo, a very high tier pro player, runs 3-3, and TSM Verhulst, one of the best controller players out there, runs 4-4. A few things to remember when looking into your own sends is that you always want to have same or slightly higher look sensitivity, because that will allow you to look around easier when just running. Lower ADS sends will make it for better tracking and be more stable when you're fighting, and the lower the sends you have, the more aim assist you have. This is because of the way input works and how aim assist plays off your sensitivity, so the higher it is, the harder it is for the assist to kick in, so they just lower the values. Now, dead zone and response curve. So for dead zone, this is how far you need to move your analog stick before it registers, and for this you'll want it as low as possible, so none. And response curve is really weird to explain. It's basically how fast your analog sticks add sensitivity, so when you move it, it gradually picks up speed over time. Most players I see run linear because it's just your raw input and doesn't have ramp up speed. It allows for more fine tuning of aim and other areas. Now let's get into the fun things, ALC or advanced look controls. This is where controller settings turn wild and can change everything, so buckle up and I'm going to explain this as best as I can. For dead zone, most players I see run it with 0%. This will add more stick drift, but in return it makes your aim a lot more snappy and responsive. But if you don't want to deal with stick drift, you can gradually turn this up until you don't notice it and play from there. Going forward, the next things are yaw and pitch speeds. These are the same as your sensitivity, they just control how you look around, same with the ADS versions of them. Like the regular settings, the higher you go, the less aim assist you have, so once again, be aware of how high you want to go. This is going to require you as a player to mess around with them and see what works for you. If you're looking for some inspiration, Jen Burton, a controller god, runs 500 with 0 on both extra settings and 0 on ramp up settings also. For his ADS, he runs 130, again with 0s on extra and ramp up. This is the equivalent of 840 for linear on regular settings. He runs this because it allows him to have better movement and good aim. So use this as a guide and see what works for you. The reason you don't want to have any extra or ramp up speeds turned on is basically because it's mouse acceleration and can screw around with how accurate you are in game. If you are weird and don't mind mouse acceleration and want to play with it on controller, then turn these up tiny amounts till you feel comfortable. Always start low and work your way up from there. Now I just want to quickly touch on ALC a little bit more. This is very in-depth and a lot of pro players don't even use this because there's a lot of cases where it isn't even worth it. This is only if you are very into fine-tuning your aim, and that's why I can't give a lot of settings on this. It's mainly personal comfort and what works best for you as a player. So if you don't want to take the time to really learn everything about ALC, it really won't affect you a whole lot in the grand scheme of the game. Now if you have a keen eye, you probably noticed that I skipped over stuff like button layout, and there was a reason for that. Mainly because I wanted to talk about it at the end and go over everything now, so let's talk layouts. I recommend your stick layout to be set to default. It's just a solid foundation, and unless you have personal issues that you need accommodated, then don't change it. For button layout, I highly recommend changing to button puncher. This changes your crouch onto your right analog stick and will allow you to crouch spam a lot easier. But if you have paddles, I highly recommend going to customize and changing the keybinds a little bit. Depending on the amount of paddles you have or remappable buttons, you'll want to have stuff like jump, crouch, and reload on your paddles. Some people also use healing on the paddles, but again, that's personal choice. It changes based on how many paddles you have, like I said. For crouch, I recommend hold because this allows for better crouch spamming abilities. Crouch spamming is extremely useful when in straight up gunfights, so I recommend a lot more people start looking to implement it. For aim, I highly recommend hold. It's just better, but some players coming from other games use toggle and find a lot of success with it. So use whatever you are more comfortable with. Survival slot should only be turned off if you want to spam inspect your heirloom to be able to do the kunai flip stuff. And trigger dead zones are just how responsive your trigger is to being pressed, so if you have trigger bumpers, you don't really need to worry about this. But if you don't, you may want to look into using none. If that's too weird, then you can just use default. And the last is menu cursor speed. This is just how fast you can sift through death boxes and help you get armor swaps and such. Some people think higher is better, but there's a fine line you need to walk. Having it too high, you may go too fast and miss stuff. Too low and you may die trying to swap. You need to find a setting that allows you to get things fast enough without missing them. For a lot of people, this is somewhere in the middle of the bar. Start low and work your way up to a higher sensitivity, and maybe you will be able to control the highest speed with ease, who knows? But that's going to be all for today's video. I hope you guys learned something new and figured out your settings for controller. A lot of settings is playing around and being able to tweak what's best for you, so I'm hoping I gave you good groundwork to go off of and find your perfect sensitivity. Once again though, if you found this video useful, please do drop a thumbs up. It helps out the channel a lot. And if you made it this far and haven't subbed yet, go smash that sub button right now and ring the bell to be notified when we post new videos. We do daily, highly educational Apex Legends content that you do not want to miss out on. Thank you all for watching. Once again, I'm 8 Second Gaming, and I will see you in the next one.